All right, guys, it's not very often that someone has the opportunity to meet one of their heroes. And they say don't meet your heroes, but I think I'm going to come away feeling very good about meeting this hero. Today I have with me Russell Thompkins Jr., who is the lead singer of the legendary soul group, the Stylistics. How are you doing, Russell?
I'm doing good. And how are you?
Very good, thank you. Let me
All right.
for those youngsters, those youngins who might not know who you are. Let me just put them in context. So I wrote down here some stuff. Of course, you are a pioneer of Philly soul, which I'll ask you to explain what that is. Uh, you released a solo album back in 2002, but then you're now part of a group since 2004 called Russell Tompkins Jr. and the New Stylistics. And we might want to talk about the reasons why you left the original group or not. That's up to you. Uh,
Mhm.
12 consecutive U.S. R&B top 10 hits and 5 top 10 U.S. hits, but none made it to number one, which shocks me. Is that true?
Yes, but that's how it is in the record business. I'm fortunate to have the hits that I have had,
Oh, of course.
and you never know what a song is going to do. Because there's more than just the music involved. There's also the business also.
So are you in all the songs that were that you've released? Did you have the ear to say, "I think this one is a hit"? And if yes, is that exactly what your infamous or famous producer Tom Bell had, which is the ability to predict that out of these 10 songs that we've got on our plate, these three we have to release because they're going to work?
Well, sometimes in the studio when you're working on the songs, you might say this is going to be a hit, but you never know. What you do is try to put together the best product and the songs that you feel, the songs that you love, the songs that you enjoy, and do the best job you can. And you don't do one song at a time. When I work with Tommy, we usually worked on about 10 songs and we listen to them and we put them all together and we see how well they fit, and we might pick 8 out of that 10 to go in the studio and cut. And the process of just doing the best job that you can, you look for a good outcome.
Unbelievable. Now, is he still, I mean, involved in the music industry, or is he out of the game?
No, he's still in the industry, but I think it's in a limited capacity.
Gotcha.
I don't think he's producing anyone now, but they still have the publishing company, and Mighty Three is still doing different things with Gamble and Huff and Bell.
Right. Now, I'm going to list some of the groups that are some of my favorites after the Stylistics. And then you tell me if I'm missing anybody. Now, most of these would, I think, qualify under the Philly Soul, genre. And then maybe you could then explain to us what Philly Soul means. So here are the groups that I listed: the Delphonics, the Moments, the Tempries, Blue Magic, the Intruders, the Main Ingredient, the Ebonies. Well, the Dramatics, I guess, is more Southern Soul. The Dells, the Shy Lights, the Spinners, the Manhattans, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, Sam Dees, Billy Paul, and Tom Brock. Did I get pretty much everybody? Am I missing someone?
No, you got almost everyone. Everyone, everyone was in the same genre, and I also would put the dramatics there also.
Right, that's what I thought. Now, of maybe you could tell us what Philly Soul is before we go on.
Well, I think Philly Soul first started at a time before the Stylistics did. We really originally started recording in 1970, 69 and 70 when we did You're a Big Girl Now. But before that, there were other artists working in the Philadelphia area that was forming the Philadelphia sound. People like Eddie Holman, people like Barbara Mason, Billy Paul, who you mentioned, because Billy started well before any of us did. Because Billy was a jazz singer in Philadelphia in the 50s and 60s. Um, the Harold Melvin Blue Notes, before Harold Melvin, it was the original Blue Notes.
Right.
They also formed the music here in Philadelphia. There was a group called the Dream Lovers here in Philadelphia that had success. And then you had all the South Philly boys, the Bobby Darrens and the James Darrens and the
Right.
Fabians and Len Barry. You know, that to me, that was when the Philly sound first started.
Now, is Philly sound largely driven by the fact that many of these groups geographically happen to be from Philly, or is it also the fact that they likely shared, a couple of musical producers and arrangers who then would sort of go through all these folks? For example, in your case, you and the Delphonics, if I remember correctly, did share Tom Bell, and therefore, by the way, I play a game with my children whom you met offline beforehand,
Mhm.
where when I play a song, I turn to them when we're driving the car and I tell them Delphonics or Stylistics, and they don't get 100% accuracy, but they're pretty good now, and they're still very young. So what that's driving the Philly soul? Is it geographic and the shared musical composers?
Well, that's the second phase of what I just got through talking about. When Gamble and Huff and Bell first started, that's when the newer vocals and the newer music people came in, such as myself. Um, the Delphonics worked with Tommy Bell. Billy Paul worked with Gamble and Huff. The Blue Notes worked with Gamble and Huff. So we all, when we first went in the studio, when Tommy was writing the songs and we cut that night, the background vocalist for the Stylistics music was not the Stylistics. The background music came from other entertainers and people here in Philly. The background vocals were done by a DJ by the name of Carl Helm, Kenny Gamble himself, a guy named Phil Hurt who wrote "Then Came You" with Tommy for the Spinners. Tommy Bell himself, a guy that just passed away not too long ago by the name of Bunny Siegler, who was a singer, and myself. So all of these people were producers and writers, but they also sang and played on the music that we made.
Wow.
And that was the second phase. And we all shared. Gamble and Huff had a great machine working for them. When you would go into their offices, they would have teams of writers. And you would go in and you would work with one team of writer one day, a next team of writer the next day, and you would work your way around to about 10 different staffs. And you would compile different types of music. Now, this song might be for the Blue Notes. This song might be for you. But we all were there producing at the same time.
And are you able to, so if they're, let's say, pitching a particular song for you, does the fact that you have a particular quality to your voice, for those of you who don't know, Mr. Thompkins here is very famous for his falsetto voice, reaching those very high notes. Are you able to sort of hear how a song is structured and say, yeah, this just doesn't work with the way that I sing, or any good singer can hit any song properly?
No, a good singer can sing anything, but you got to feel it.
Okay.
You have to know it's for you. And the only way you can do that is by learning the song and singing it. And when you sing it, you know this is for me.
Right.
Or either you say, wait a minute, this is not quite right. Certain songs you have to work on. If you listen to it, you say, if it went this way or changed this way, maybe then I can do something with it. But when you work with somebody like Tom Bell has a good idea after working with your voice of how to build a song around you, or if it's a song that might be for you. Because Tommy treats every entity of the composition like it's an instrument. When Tommy would look at me, he would look at me like, is this the right instrument for this song? And 9 times out of 10, he's right.
Wow. Now, I saw a chat that you held with, I can't remember the name of the gentleman. I think it was maybe in your house. It was outdoors. It was a very long chat where you at one point you were talking about the various, legendary hits that you've had. But you said that there's this one song where when you listen to it, but the crowd, the regular person doesn't know that you've made some error. Are you ready? Because I've never heard you sing and found any errors. But then again, I'm just an amateur. So
I'll never tell.
Oh, damn it. Now I'm...
I'll never tell.
Okay, got you. Maybe you could tell us how it all started for you in terms of did you feel like you were sort of predestined from a very young age? You knew that this was what you were going to do? Was it accidental? How did you become the lead singer of the Stylistics?
Well, I always sang, but I never thought about being an entertainer. I sang in the glee club when I was in elementary school. I sang in the glee club in the choirs when I was in junior high school. But I never took it as serious enough to think that I would be in the business. They had a place here called the Uptown Theater where all the entertainers would come. And I lived close to there. So when the shows would come to Philly, I would go see them. You know, I would see all the artists before me, the Motown Reviews with the Temptations, Four Tops. I would see all these acts, but I just enjoyed them. But one thing I knew, that when I listened to their records, I could emulate them.
Right.
But I still didn't know I was going to be in show business. But then in one of the choirs I was in junior high school, I met a couple of guys who were in the choirs, and we started singing on the corner, getting together, you know, hitting some of the new songs that were out and things like that. And no matter what I tried to do to get away from music, it always came back. And next thing I know, it was building. Put a group together, get some guys in the neighborhood that played instruments, practice, rehearse. We had some people, some elders, you know, who saw potential in us and started investing their time and their money in us, taking us around, talking to people, and things started to develop. And next thing I know, somebody said, I'll pay you to do what you do for free. Then it became my job.
Wow. Now, I'm not sure if you know anything about my professional career, but I'm an evolutionary psychologist. So I study sort of the biological drivers that shape human behavior. And so one of the things that I talk about is, you know, mating preferences. What are the things that men love about women around the world? What are the things that women love about men? And we certainly know that women love men of high status, and you could reach high status in many ways. You could become a famous singer, you could become a diplomat, you could become a famous scientist, whatever it is. And we know that, you know, singers are very much appreciated by the ladies. So as you're growing up, are you thinking that is certainly going to be one way where I'm going to become popular with the ladies, or was it strictly a pure love for the music, and whatever happened with the ladies is something that was a consequence afterwards?
No, ladies weren't involved.
Okay, because
They weren't involved. No, they weren't involved. Ladies were always there.
right,
It had nothing to do. You know, the music just made it more so.
right.
But I think that is a byproduct of people who are in the arts. But
Right.
there's somebody for everybody.
Well, that's a very hopeful message. So, all right, let's move on to, let's say, when you start gaining fame and you know you're obviously getting recognized everywhere. How do you react to that fame then and then now? And the reason I ask is because as an academic, you know, very few academics become known outside of their, you know, limited spheres of influence. But when you become someone who is very much in the public eye, as I've become, I've had the opportunity to experience what it is to be recognized on the street and so on. Certainly, I'm certain nothing compared to what you've experienced. And there are wonderful qualities to that. When people come up to you and say, hey, you know, I read your books, I watch your show, I love what you do and so on, you feel good. But also there's a sense of intrusion. You sometimes feel uncomfortable with it, especially when I'm with my children. I don't like people to take pictures. When we spoke to you offline, I didn't put them online, right? So I'm
Yeah.
very guarded about this. How is it for you, given that you've obviously experienced a level of fame that's probably 100 times that which someone like me might have experienced?
I've always had a theory of how you carry yourself is how your fame is being handled. I've always been accessible to people. I've never had trouble with people, you know, looking at me and saying, "Oh, let's go bother him. Let's go get an autograph." And when people do that, I just comply.
Right.
You know, I have no problem, you know, being nice and talking to people. And it depends on how you deal with people eye to eye with a handshake, that they take you seriously and they give you the same respect that you give them. And as far as fame itself, it just seemed like I grew into that. You know, it just became a part of my life and a part of being in the music business. But trying to be humble. People have always talked to me about being humble. at being appreciative of the things that that God has given you, and other people who have helped you along the way. So I've never let fame do that to me, but I've never had the type of fame that some other people have had.
Right now, I suspect that someone like you, who at the maximum point of your fame, there wasn't social media and so on. So even as extraordinarily famous as you might have been, it's nothing compared to what some talentless reality star today can get in terms of fame within 15 minutes. And so in a sense, maybe that's protected you, right? Because you were able to be famous, but at a level that the human mind can comprehend. Because today, within 15 seconds, you could be known, your photo could be, circulated everywhere around the world, right?
Yes, you're right about that. Even yesterday I went shopping. And when I got through shopping, I went to, and people usually, in Philadelphia here, people usually don't pay no attention to me. And like you said, it's not that type of fame that I have. They know my voice more than they know my face.
Oh, right.
So when I was coming out of I went to McDonald's. When I came out of McDonald's, I walked past a guy that held the door for him. And he turned around and he looked at me. He said, "Ain't you?" He said, "Stylistics?" I said, "Yeah, how you doing?" He said, "How you feeling?" "I really love your music. Good to see you." And that's how it is with me when I meet people. They know who I am, but they don't go crazy about it.
I was going to say that I think in your case, I mean, the first music in general, but certainly the music that you've sang, and as I said offline, I suspect that between you and Barry White, you are responsible for half the current world's population. So thank you for the overcrowding of the planet, Mr. Thompkins. But in any case, I think when someone is approaching you, it almost could never be for a negative reason, because your music makes people feel good. Whereas I think maybe one of the reasons why, in my case, I'm a bit more guarded is because while most people might love my ideas, I do criticize a lot of things that get people upset. I might criticize this ideology, or I might criticize this belief. And so even though out of 100 people who come up to me, I'd like to think 98 or 99 are going to be very nice to me, there is the one who's been sending me hate mail, who might be the guy who's approaching. And so in that sense, that's created a bit of anxiety in me, because I never know when someone comes up and says, "Excuse me, are you," I don't know if they're going to shake my hand or spit in my face. You know what I mean?
Some people take ideas the wrong way and don't know how to appreciate someone else's opinion.
There you, well, geez, you've already solved by that statement, you've solved half the problems we have in universities, because I don't know if you follow any of that stuff, but one of the problems in universities is that there's this incredible intolerance for diversity of ideas.
Yeah.
So we should all think X, Y, Z, and if you don't, then you must be a Nazi and a racist and a KKK. There's this and in the place where you should be most tolerant for opposing ideas and debate them and defeat them peacefully, that's where people don't want to engage in ideas. You either believe what I believe in, or we shut you down. Have you been following any of that stuff?
No, I haven't, but I still believe that it depends on how people present their ideas also.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I hear you. So I'm gonna come in a second to how you feel before you sing and so on, because I could link it to how I feel when I say give a talk.
Yes.
They're both performances in one form or another. But are there any contemporary singers that you admire? I mean, not because of how they. I mean, you could say how they handle it, but the music. That this is what's on your playlist when you're driving from Philly to New York.
Oh wow, I listen to everything, but I think mostly I listen to Dionne Warwick every day. She's my favorite artist.
Dionne Warwick?
Yes.
I saw her in concert in Montreal a few years ago.
Okay, well, she's my all-time favorite. I listen to a lot of Temptations every day. I listen to a group called The Whispers every day. I listen to a singer by the name of Bobby Caldwell every day. And almost everything else I listen to is instrumental music. I like smooth jazz, and I like straight ahead jazz.
Unbelievable. Are there any people, both when you were coming up or today, that if you meet them, you get nervous at the thought of meeting them because, wow, they're, you somehow appreciate them. I don't mean starstruck, because ultimately you've been in this business for 50 years. It's not like you're going to be phased. But is there anybody that you say, geez, I'd like to sit down with this person and have a chat because they just seem fascinating. I want to pick their brains, whether it be in the music industry or otherwise?
I'm very careful with that, because when I first got into business, and I won't mention no names, back in the early 70s, I ran across some people who weren't very nice, that were stars that I looked up to. And I remember going over trying to be friendly and saying something to them and being pushed aside.
Wow.
So I learned my lesson about entertainers and dealing with them as entertainers or either people. And I know that we all have our faults, we all have our problems. So I'd rather deal with them with musically than to deal with them personally.
Right.
Because everybody's not a good person. I don't care if your music is good or your art is good or your teaching is good, your philosophy is good. But as a person, you might be something very, I don't want to say the word.
Right.
But, I watch it very carefully who I talk to and who I deal with.
Are some of your close friends from the industry or not at all? I mean, you've got your job as a singer, and then your private life has nothing to do with music.
There's no such thing. My life period is music. There's no separation of private life or anything like that. That's all I do. I make music. Almost every day, what I do is I spend time with my wife, I exercise, and I make music. I don't do anything else.
That's amazing. What passion. All right, let's continue talking about. Oh, I was going to ask you about when you go up, on stage. Now, before I state the question. When I walk into class the first time, I always tell my students, because the public speaking is the number one fear that people have. If you ask them, what is the number one thing you're scared most of? They're more scared of public speaking than death. And so I always tell them to kind of put them at ease. I say, look, I've been doing this. I've lectured in front of, I don't know how many, tons of people in my life. And yet, before I came to see you this morning for the first time for our first class, I had butterflies in my stomach. So it's totally normal that you're afraid to speak, because I'm trying to prepare them for when they're going to have to present their projects and so on. And that kind of humanizes it, because it shows them that, hey, even if this guy whose job it is to stand up and speak all day long could get nervous, well, then it's okay for me to be nervous. So someone like you, who's probably sang to 50, 100 million people, are you getting butterflies and getting a bit nauseous before, or you've done it so many times, it's no problem for you?
I have so great of a stage fright that you wouldn't believe.
You're kidding.
When I first started singing, I would get on stage. I was so afraid that my leg would start shaking that I would grab it and I couldn't make it stop. I've always had that stage fright, but the older I became, the more I learned how to tolerate being afraid. I turned it into something else, and it became anxiousness. When I stand on the side of the stage, I feel like a horse in the stall before the door opened and they got to go running. That's what it's become. But it's still a certain amount of anxiousness. It's not as frightening as it used to be, but it's turned into an anxiousness. My stage fright was so bad that back in the 70s, the first time I played Vegas, I got a chance to meet Sammy Davis Jr. I told him, I said, what can I do to get rid of this stage fright? And he told me something that I've always carried with me. He said, never worry about having stage fright, because all it means is you care.
That's exactly right. Wow, that's incredible. Now, are you able to sort of step back and talk to yourself about why it is that you're experiencing that anxiety? Is it a fear of failure? What if I get up there with 10,000 people who are waiting to hear every note and my voice gives out on me? Or you just can't pinpoint it. You're just afraid, and there is no source that you could go to explain that anxiety.
All of the above.
Okay.
But mainly it's performing well. Maybe because there's a preparation of that happens all the whole day. It's not always easy just to sing. You have to prepare yourself to sing. You have to take care of yourself, sleep a certain way, and every day it's like sometimes it's like your voice has a mind of its own. It says to you when you wake up, "I'm going to work today."
Wow.
Then some days you get up and it says, "No, I don't feel like it today." And
But what is it? Is it what's happening? And is it your vocal cords are not loose enough? What's the physiological thing that's allowing you to say today is going to be a good voice day, today is not going to be a good voice day? What determines that?
I think it's all in the human body. You know, like if you're training and you're working and you're doing it all the time, then your voice seems to respond because it's on call. But if you're not doing it all the time and you're home and you have some time off, you have to get yourself back into the mood of doing that. So it's a physical thing. It's like if you don't run and you try to run, it's going to hurt.
Right.
It's not gonna, it's not gonna be. But if you train every day, after a week or 2 weeks of getting yourself in shape, when you go do it, it don't hurt as much. It's easier to do, and the voice is the same way. It's a friend of mine always says if you don't use it, you lose it.
Wow. Now
so you have to work at it.
You in that chat that I mentioned earlier that you held a few years ago, I think you had stated that. You at one point you decided to live very cleanly, no alcohol, no cigarettes. Now, was that just a decision that you made because you just wanted to be a healthy person, or did you consciously link it? Oh, if I stop these things, then I could have better outcomes with my voice, or is it both?
It is both, but mostly it was because I wanted better physical ability. I've always been an athlete all my life. I've always, played basketball. I always ran. I've always been an athlete. So I always knew that smoking and whatever else I did was a hindrance, to singing and to and to my sports. So when I reached a certain age, you get to telling yourself, because your ability starts to diminish the older you get.
Your ability, in your case, what, to hit the high notes,
just to sing efficiently. Period.
Okay.
Just to be better at what I do. And when I stopped smoking, it was for a project. I said I'm gonna stop smoking cigarettes to do this project. I didn't know that withdrawal from tobacco was going to be that type of problem. My voice went crazy when I stopped doing everything. My voice just went. It went somewhere, and I was
for the better or for the worse?
For the worse.
Oh, for the worse. Okay.
And it got to a point where I couldn't almost sing at all. And at the end of from the alcohol and from the smoking and all that, it affected my voice in a way where I had to stop singing. So that's when I left the original group. And after stopping everything that I was doing, my voice started to repair itself, and that's when I started singing again. But that's not the main reason why I left singing with the other Stylistics. But that's all of that is growing, aging, and learning what you should do and what you should not do as far as your physical abilities and your body is concerned.
Unbelievable. So do we want to talk at all about why the split happens, or it's been discussed elsewhere and we don't care?
Oh, no, I don't care. I can talk about it. There was dissension in the stylistic organization from the start. Because when we went in the studio to record, when we did You're a Big Girl Now, Tommy Bell did not want to work with the other members of the Stylistics. So he told me, he wanted to work with me, and I went in and I recorded. But I went back to the group and told them that no matter what happens from this venture that I'm doing, we all will share in the outcome. And that was my decision. I don't know if that was a good one now. Hindsight is 2020.
Depends what your net worth is now, right?
Not just that. The moral aspect of doing the right thing.
Of course.
because I've noticed that when you do the right thing, you gain from that later in your life or whatever. So I worked and I did that, but then the group, we were friends in the beginning, but then things started to change. And they started to change for reasons like you said earlier, the stardom, people, giving you notoriety, pat on the backs, and you're this, you're great, and you're that, and all that. And people's minds started, to venture. People start paying more attention to me because I was singing all that. The other guys might have had a little jealousy, a little
Sure.
no problem with that, And then I started having a problem with doing all the work and everybody sharing in the same amount. When I might go in the studio to do all the work, but when we're traveling on the road, why don't you pick up your end,
Right.
help out, do certain things? They refuse to do things like that. So then the problems started happening. Then Tommy Bell left in '73 after the first 3 albums, and it was a decision to make to either go on to new producers or stay with the same record company. And I didn't want Tommy to leave. So when he left, I had to make a decision either to stay with the group and work with the new producers or leaving and trying to venture out on my own. And I was getting offers. People were asking me to come to do other things. And I talked to one of the Temptations. His name was Eddie Kendricks.
Of course.
And I asked him I explained my problem to him. And his what he said was, do you know how many people you're feeding?
Right.
He said, all the people in your act, their kids, their wives, their mothers. He said, everything from the beginning. He said, you're the cause of all of this right now. So when you make your decision, think about that. So I decided to stay. And I stayed for the next, 30 years, 33 years.
Wow.
But it got worse. I mean, it just continuously got worse. Year after year after year after year, until it beat me down. And by '99, I was totally beat. When I left the group, I didn't care if I ever sang again. I didn't care if I ever went out and, sang professionally. I could always sing. My wife told me when I left, she said, your music is not just your voice. Your music is you.
Right.
I went back to school. I learned to play piano. I learned to read music. So I constantly applied music to my life. I just wasn't with them. And a guy that I worked with in '96 by the name of Chris Beeler, he's the one I quit smoking cigarettes for, for his project. And he kept pestering me. He kept saying, Russell, I want you to record this song for me. I said, Chris, I'm not in the music business anymore. I don't want to record. I don't want to do that. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll buy you the equipment. You put it in your house. And when you feel like singing or recording it, go ahead and do it.
He put the right dangle, like the right bait for you, right?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Because that's how he is.
Right.
And I started singing that song that he wanted. Next thing I knew, I had recorded 17 songs.
Wow.
And that was when the solo album came out. At the same time, I would see members of the old group, because when I left the original Stylistics, they fired the band that was playing for them, that had been there all them years, partially because of loyalty that they had to me. So I would see them and they would keep saying, Russ, we need to put a band together. Let's put a band together. One of the guys who had sang with us for a while and played, Raymond Johnson, who I sing with now, he would say the same thing. And a guy that worked in a group that I managed for a while, he said the same thing. So after the solo album came out, it seemed like that running away from music was starting to happen again.
Wow. So had he not succeeded in luring you back to the music industry, notwithstanding the fact that you were getting, your education at that point, your musical education, your formal musical education, what could you have envisioned yourself being at that point outside of the music industry? Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't know,
Okay.
and I didn't care, because the day after I left working with the Stylistics, it was a weight taken off of me.
Right.
I became so happy. I felt so free, and that I didn't care if I ever went back and did it again.
So how now you're talking about things like, the festering anger in you, it's weighing you down, which I guess leads me to the next question. How does the fact, I mean, earlier you were saying, depending on how I feel that day, my voice comes out or not. Well, part of what you feel in a given day, other than the physiological things, is your emotional state, right? Let's suppose earlier that day you had a fight with your wife, and it's a big fight. But guess what? In 2 hours, I got to show up at the Apollo Theater in front of a very exacting crowd and sing all of my songs. And it doesn't matter what's in my head. I got to perform. That does. How do you get over that? And is that something that can affect you as you're singing, or at one point you become so professional that for the next 2 hours I could put it aside and just sing "You Are Everything," no problem.
You never put it aside, but the reason why you go is because it's your job. You got to go to work. That same thing I just got through saying. There's so many people who depend on you that you got to go. They're waiting for you. So when you go there, you don't put it aside. In fact, it's in your mind. And while you're singing, it becomes a part of what you do.
So
You know,
potentially, the way you sing the song, you're singing about a song where there's pain, some love pain. Now
yes,
you could take that emotional state, somehow sing it differently at that point because of what just happened to you earlier 2 hours ago.
yes, you might not know it, but
All right.
the audience will. I've had people that know me that seen me hundreds of times, and because of certain things that happened to me emotionally, they said, you really were into what you were doing tonight. Not that you're not all the time, but
Right.
something tonight was different.
Wow.
And all of them, your emotional state is always when you're creating, it
Right.
always comes out.
Right. Uh, do you ever get so? Let me bring it to me. I love lecturing. I love to see how my students, if hopefully I'm doing a good job, they're responding to whatever I'm lecturing. But once in a while, I might turn to my wife and say, I don't feel like going to class today and lecturing. I've taught this stuff, 50 times. Even though once I get in there and the show starts, I'm ready, right? But once in a while you get that apprehension. So yes, you all of these great songs that you're saying are legendary and people want to hear it. But do you ever say, what? I wish I could go today and not perform a single one of the songs that they want me there for, and only sing new stuff because I'm tired of singing "You Are Everything."
Oh yeah, you say that sometimes, and sometimes I say to myself, I should have stayed retired. Why did I come back to this, to this anguish? And you go on stage and the automatic thing jumps in there and you do the best you can and you finish the show and you move on. And when the next show comes up, you prepare yourself again. It's like I can be angry and it could be something that's really bothering me. And if it's at a time when I'm training and I'm running, I can burn it off by just putting extra miles on the
Right,
run because I've ran with anger for a long time
right,
because I had a lot of anger when I first left the group. And I remember that anger would push me when I was running. It would push me and push me and push me because I knew that the running was going to make me better. And I had to be better to fight everything that was bothering me at the time. So when I'm thinking about bettering myself, it just pushes me and pushes me to do things better and harder. So, I don't like to lose,
I
for
hear it.
one.
Well, I don't think you could do. I was talking to my wife yesterday about some of my sort of professional issues, and we were talking about egos. And I was saying, look, it's very nice for people to be humble, and I mean, I'd like to think that in my core I'm humble, but also to do what I do, you also have to have an ego, right? You could not get up in front of a public and take the positions that you do as a professor or as a public intellectual, or in your case as a singer, if you don't also have an ego, because people always associate ego with the negative, right? You're
Yeah.
egotistical, but also ego drives you, right? You and I couldn't do what we respectively do if we didn't have healthy egos. We don't like to lose. We like to perform. We like people to appreciate us. So ultimately, you can't create without an ego.
Yes, I think that having an ego makes you want to do it good.
Right.
And one reason why it makes you want to be good and be better is because you're your worst critic, your most, worst critic. And if you don't do it well for yourself, how you think you're going to do it well for anyone else? So I've always tried to, do the best I can for myself. Some people might think it's ego if I come on stage and the person says to me, "Wow, that was a great show." And inside of me, I said, "That's one of the worst shows I ever did in my life," and they love it. But then when someone come off and say that was a great show, I say, "Thank you very much." But inside of me, I'm saying, I already know that.
Right.
I know that that was one of my best shows. But, I don't say it to them or show it to them, but I know it. And then sometime I say to myself, I don't need anyone to tell me anything about the show.
Right.
I just go up there and do it, and I don't want to hear anything because I know that it was a good show or I know it was a bad show. So, it's a constant fight within yourself to keep yourself in tune with being the right type of human being and keeping your ego in check.
Right. The way you speak, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, could it be that you're a bit of a perfectionist? Is that a fair assessment?
I wouldn't say a perfectionist, but I try to do the best I can.
Got it.
And I know the difference in the best and, the best and the worst. So I try to stay on the good side.
Well, that's a healthy attitude, because I think one of my flaws is that I do suffer from perfectionism. And perfectionism can be quite an anguishing thing, because you're always setting to yourself a threshold that is so hard to reach that you're constantly double checking. So, I mean, take a mundane example. If I'm sending out a tweet or a message, so what if there's a comma that's out of place? Well, I will check it 35,000 times before I send it. And if I find out that there is a typo, then I have to correct it. So on the one hand, it's great to have some perfectionist tendencies, because that assures that, as you said earlier, you care, but then you don't want it to get too much, because then it could be quite stifling.
The reason why I say I'm not a perfectionist is because when I do something and it just don't seem to want to go right, I can say to hell with it. I don't care. and move on.
Right. Gotcha. A couple of more questions, and then I'll let you go, Russell. Why is it that you think that, now, again, it might be biased because I love your music so much and you're the guy who sings that music, but to me, the music that you sing and all those other groups that we talked about is timeless music. It seems to me that it's not, it's got this haunting melodic quality that I don't care if it was sang 100 years ago or 300 years from now. To me, it seems like everybody should appreciate it. And yet, of course, musical genres change. Now, in your view, are you able to now connect to 16-year-olds who discover your music and appreciate what I just said? Or is it that very much music is tied to a period, and ultimately the people that you're typically singing to are going to be people who are my age to your age, because we're the ones who grew up listening to you singing?
I get a lot of young people who have discovered my music, and that Philly music has this thing about it that all ages seem to like it.
Exactly.
And when I try to to discover why it's that way, what comes to me is that everything that the songs that Gamble and Huff and Tommy Bell and Linda Creed and all of them wrote were things that happened to us in our everyday life.
Right.
But they're not just the outside things. It's the inside things. I was just talking with one of the executives at Philly International because I just came back from off the Soul Train cruise, and they have discussions on the cruise. They let people give a question and answer. It's a Q&A thing that happens, and we were talking about what inspires songs. When Tommy Bell wrote "You're Everything," him and Linda went out to lunch. And he saw a guy walk up to a lady and tap her on the shoulder and say to her, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were someone else." So then they go back in the office and they write, "Today I saw somebody who look just like you. She walks like you do. I thought it was you.
Unbelievable.
But you know, just to put it in melody, that is so poetic and so strong. And I don't care what age you are, when you hear that and you can see the story, it's wonderful.
So why aren't people today? I mean, I could only think of one person, and I'm gonna assume you know him, but you'll tell me if you do or not. I could only think of one person who is making music today that is reminiscent of the Philly sound, and that's a guy by the name of Mayer Hawthorne. Do you know who that is?
No, not. I don't know why the name is familiar, but I don't know him.
Oh, I'll send you the link to some of his stuff.
Oh,
He's a guy I think originally from Detroit, and when I first quote discovered him, I just couldn't believe that he was a contemporary guy. He's like I think he's like a 30-year-old white Jewish guy,
uh-huh.
but who sings. I mean, you would think he was part of the Philly sound, and I'm thinking,
Okay.
why aren't there any musical producers today who are saying, you know what, I want to bring back. I mean, not only do we want to honor the Stylistics and the Tempris and the Delphanes, but why isn't somebody today creating that music?
Um, the conversation or the story has changed. The way people talk to each other now has changed. The way people feel and express themselves has changed. Not
Not
it's the same.
not the underlying emotions, but the
Yeah,
expression.
the
Exactly.
expression has changed, and so people feel different about each other, so they say different things. But that don't mean that they still don't feel the same way they did when the songs that I sang, were done. When you speak about someone else who wrote songs about the inner self and that type of situation, I have to go to Motown. Nobody could do it like Smokey Robinson.
Oh yeah.
So Smokey Robinson wrote a song that Michael Jackson sang when he was 12 years old and sang it like he had lived it, and he
Yeah.
had. And then I wonder who's loving you.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you hear Michael Jackson sing that, you say to yourself, how does this little boy know about this,
Right.
this subject? But that's because of Smokey Robinson. He could write great songs like that. But I don't listen to a lot of music, today's music, unless it's around me, because I study music now more than I just
Right.
listen to it for enjoyment.
No, but
But
I'm sorry. Well, I think what you said is exactly spot on because there is a poetry to, even though it's very simple, right? I mean, you're not trying to be unnecessarily complicated, but there's a poetry to how the love was sang. Whereas today, as you said, I mean, it's very direct, right? It doesn't leave much for the foreplay, so to speak, of the mind. And I
yeah,
think maybe that's what you're alluding to, right?
yes, and it can be very harsh.
Right.
It's so direct that it's very harsh. You know, a lot of the things that they do is positive because they're not holding back of how they feel,
Right.
and a lot of the feelings that they have are is true. The young people who want to rebel, young people who think that things are not right in this world, they don't pussyfoot around about it. They come out and they just say it directly.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not a big fan of rap music or anything like that, but I still defend the right to them to be able to say and do what they want to do.
Sure, I hear you. Uh, are there any current projects that you're working on that you'd like to use this small platform to promote?
Um, no, just doing my regular shows and traveling around and whatever. I don't work as much as I used to, and I don't want to.
Right.
But 1 gig or 2 gigs a month is fine.
Well,
And
compared to
I'm
Mick
getting ready,
Jagger, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm getting ready to sign a deal to do a show in Baltimore in June. And this is going to be a very unique show because they want to take the Morgan State choir, college choir, and another choir in Baltimore, and put them with three singers: myself, Gerald Austin of the Manhattans, and Howard Hewitt,
Sure.
another R&B singer. and they want us to sing a variety of different songs along with our songs. They
Wow.
want us to do classical music. They want us to do music from the past. They want us to do spirituals and different things like that. So, in that's happening in June, and we're just talking about the business part of it right now. But right away, my mind is already on the music. You know, how can I do it? How can I sing it? Going back to period songs and things like that. So that's the newest thing on my agenda right now.
Are you planning on? I know that you tour with the new Stylistics. Are you planning to release any new music, any new albums with your new group?
Um, Maybe. No, I don't know if it's going to be new music, but one of the guys in the group he has the thoughts of us trying to do some of the things, and we sing this well. Some of the things that the Carpenters did.
Oh, I love them. By the way, one of my other, I mean, you were on top of the list of people that I want to meet, sort of outside my usual sphere of, of academia and so on. Another one I'd love to meet, maybe you could facilitate it, Burt Bacharach. My Lord, I'd love to have a chat with him. Any chance that Mr. Tompkins can make that happen?
I don't know because at Bert's age now, he is only out and I only have a association with him rarely.
Okay.
And it's really, I don't know if I'll ever see Bert again because we became close when he produced me. But then the president of the record company that I was with, Amherst Records, was a personal friend of Bert. So we would talk to each other through mutual friends.
Got it.
And I have one other mutual friend that talks to Bert also, so we talk to each other that way. But being in his presence and being around him, it's been a long time. Bert is not a young man.
He must be in his early 90s now, right?
Yeah. Yes, he is. And I don't know how much, out in the public and things that he's doing now. But Bert is one of my most favorite people too. When I recorded with Burt Bacharach and his wife at the time, Carol Baird Sager, they were the most professional people I had ever worked with. And working with Tommy Bell prepared me to be able to go in the studio and work with them because they were spot on. They knew exactly. I've never worked with a woman that was in the studio, and when we would run into a problem or anything like that, bam, she knew how to fix it right away, vocally, musically. The session was so wonderful, and I don't blame you for wanting me, Bert.
I'll end it in the following way, and I think you like the story. And I even had, if I remember correctly, when I reached out to you originally to try to connect with you, I might have even mentioned the story, but maybe the crowd doesn't know it, so let me mention it. Back in 2001, when I was a professor at University of California, Irvine, I had this silly idea of reaching out to your representatives just to find out how much it would cost to have a private concert with the Stylistics. And the response that I got back very quickly showed me that professors don't make enough money to hire the Stylistics. so as it turns out, 16, 17 years later, I even got a bigger honor than having the Stylistics sing for me. Although that still stays on my wish list. I got the chance to chat for almost an hour with the guy who gave us all this unbelievable music. Russell, I can't thank you enough for having made the time to chat with me. Stay on the line. A real honor. I mean, let me tell you, talking about being nervous, I've talked to all sorts of really famous and important people. I wasn't ever as butterflied in my stomach as what I was about talking to you. You're a delightful man. It's an honor to meet you, sir.
Same here, very much. I enjoy talking to you also.
Oh, you're very kind. Cheers. Stay on the line.